Today guys, we are going to be building a $1,200 gaming PC, and honestly, $1,200 is one of my favorite budgets to build with. I really do think you get the best value from $1,000 to $1,500 gaming PCs, and this one is close to the middle. So like always, I will leave links to everything in the description below, and let's just get right into it. Okay, so starting with the CPU, we have the Ryzen 7 5800 XT, which you can get for $228. Now, this is an 8-core and 16-thread CPU, which does make this excellent for anything from gaming, multitasking, or even content creation. And overall, for this budget, and especially since this is a gaming PC, this CPU is going to do really well. And especially since this does have higher boost clocks, you actually are going to get better performance, especially in CPU-dependent games like esports titles. Now, it does actually come with the CPU itself and the stock cooler, which will work just fine, so we will be using this as our CPU cooler. But if you did want to get some additional performance, you of course could get a third-party one, but I think this is going to work perfectly fine for this build. So this is basically all we're going to need from the box, but we're actually going to put this aside because of course we're going to need our motherboard first. And the one that we're using here is the ASUS Prime B550MA Wi-Fi Mark II, which you can get for $85. Now, I use this motherboard in pretty much all of my builds, and for good reason. I really do think the feature set you get for the price is pretty much some of the best you can get on the market. You do have built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which to a lot of people is really important. And of course, we're on the AM4 platform, which allows us to save a lot of money, especially with RAM, because even though the market actually has been getting a little bit better, RAM prices are still pretty bad. So of course, the first thing we're going to do is install the CPU, which is one of the easiest things of the build. All you have to do is pull this lever up, and basically you just have to line up this triangle on the corner of the CPU to the triangle on the motherboard, which is in this corner here. And then all you have to do is simply just place it down smoothly. Just like that, the CPU is in, and then you just have to pull the lever down, and that's basically all you have to do to install the CPU. Then the next thing we're going to do is actually install this CPU cooler, which is actually the first time I've actually used the one that came from AMD that isn't the Raid Stealth. This is actually kind of the updated version. It's actually really beefy. You can see there's a lot more heat sinks, and yeah, we're going to install this right now. Okay, so the CPU cooler is now installed. All you really have to do is set these two latches onto the black little plastic clips, and then all we have to do from here is plug in this into the CPU cooler header, which should be this one just beside the RAM slots. So we're going to plug that in, and then we're just going to kind of hide the wire under the CPU cooler, and then hopefully make it look a little nicer later down the road. Okay, so next thing to install is the RAM, and the one that we have here is the TeamGroup T-Force Vulcan Z DDR4 kit at 3200 megahertz, 16 gigabytes. Basically, this is the kit that I use in almost all of my builds, and you can actually get this for $120, which is pretty expensive still. Now, of course, when you compare it to DDR5, this looks a lot better, but a 16 gigabyte kit at $120 is still pretty insane. Considering that this kit was going for like $45 just 2 years ago, and it's actually gone up in price even though it's an older generation, is really crazy. But 16 gigabytes should still be enough for most games depending on what you're playing. Of course, 32 gigabytes would have been a lot nicer to see here, but prices just really won't let us have that happen. So to install these, they're pretty simple. We're going to install them into the second and fourth slot, and then we're just going to give them some pressure on both sides until you hear the click, and yeah, just like that, the RAM is now installed. Now, the last thing to install onto the motherboard is the SSD, which the one that I'm using is the T-Force Z44A7Q 1TB Gen 4 drive, but the one that I have linked below is the Patriot P400, which is going for $148. So if you guys didn't know, SSD prices are also up alongside RAM, so basically I try to recommend any 1TB Gen 4 drive that is cheapest at the moment, and it just so happens that the P400 is the option. But Gen 4 speeds are going to be more than enough, and since we are on the B550M platform, we are limited to PCIe 4.0 anyways. But yeah, $148 for the cheapest 1TB Gen 4 drive is still really crazy. I mean, you know, these were going for like $70–80 just even a year ago, so we're really not getting the best value still when it comes to SSDs and RAM, but hopefully that does get fixed soon. So to install this, it is really simple. We just have to take out this screw at the bottom here, which is basically what's going to hold down the SSD. Then we are going to slide the SSD into the slot, making sure it's aligned properly, and then to hold it down, you're just going to screw the screw back in, and just like that, the SSD is now fully installed, and everything on the motherboard is basically in. And yeah, if you guys are wondering about this screwdriver, this is actually the LTT one. They sent it out to me recently, and yeah, it's actually been so great. I think this is actually the first screwdriver that I've used that isn't just like one that I've had lying around the house, but yeah, it is really nice to have this screwdriver. So thanks again to LTT for sending this out. But now guys, let's move on to the case, which the one that I'm using is the Okinos Uno, which you can get for $50. Now I actually just used this case in my last build, and I'm using it again here because I think the value for $50 is really nice here. One of the reasons I like this so much is that it already comes with 3 RGB fans built in, so you don't have to go out and buy additional fans after you get the case. It also has a fully toolless design, which is honestly one of my favorite parts, so you don't need to unscrew any screws. You can basically just pop any of the panels off, and it's really easy to access everything. So the first thing we're going to install is the IO shield, which is pretty simple. All we have to do is make sure it's aligned properly, so you can actually just go up to your motherboard and then make sure that the holes actually align. And then you're just going to simply pop that into place in the slot. Now that we have that installed, we can actually just get this motherboard placed in. So we're just going to line this up properly. Make sure that all the standoffs are properly in, but the Okinos Uno should have all of them in already. And then basically we're going to place this down slowly, making sure we're not hitting anything, and then line up all of the holes with the standoffs. And once you get it fully aligned, it actually shouldn't move at all because the standoffs actually hold it in place even without any screws in. So what we're going to do now is basically screw this motherboard in to make sure that it's fully secure. Okay, and once we have all of these screws installed, we can actually move on to the power supply. So the one that we're using in this build is the MSI Mag A750GL, which you can get for $96. Now, 750 watts is going to be more than enough for all of the parts in this build. We also have an 80+ gold rating, meaning this power supply is going to be more efficient than most of them on the market. And by far my favorite part of this power supply is that it's fully modular, meaning that we only have to plug in the wires that we're actually going to use. So the ones that we're going to need to plug in for this build is the 24-pin one, which is going to be this one and this one down here. We're also going to need the CPU one, of course, which is just going to be right beside the 24-pin. Then we're going to need the PCIe one for our power supply, and also a SATA one, which is actually what the fans plug into with this case. But if we had a non-modular power supply, we would have all of these wires already pre-connected, but since we do have a modular one, we can choose just the ones that we need. So as you guys can see, we have all of the wires plugged in, and basically we can now screw this into the case. So basically you're going to slide this power supply in with the fan facing down, and then you're going to take the 4 screws and basically just screw them into the side over here. And then from here, this is basically where we can start pre-wiring everything and getting everything plugged in. So we're going to put like the 24-pin through this hole here, the CPU one through the top right, and then all of the case fans will also go through the holes that are on the bottom here. So this will take a little bit of time, but I'll bring you guys back once everything is wired up. All right guys, so now we have everything wired. So as you guys can see, we have the CPU 8-pin plugged into the corner here. We also have the 24-pin that's going through this hole here. This is the USB 3.0 header, which goes right below the 24-pin. And then at the bottom, we also have our, for example, the HD audio cable down here. We also have the front header panels that are down here, which is for like the power switch. And yeah, basically everything is routed perfectly. And we also pre-routed the PCIe wire, which will be for the GPU we're going to install right now. So for this build, we are going with the ASUS RX 9060 XT 16GB, which you can get for $480. Now, I've been using this GPU in a ton of different builds, and one of the reasons for that is simply the 16GB of VRAM. Especially since we're going to be targeting 1440p gaming, having more VRAM really does help. And 16GB is actually a lot, especially for more of a kind of budget to mid-range GPU. A lot of the ones that you're going to see maybe have 12GB, but 16GB is actually quite a bit. And even though the price of this card is up a bit, I still do think it is a pretty decent value. Of course, we have this more compact build, which I do really think matches well with the MATX case that we have. So to install this is going to be pretty simple. All we have to do first is remove this little bracket that actually blocks the way of installing it in. So you just have to unscrew it and then take this out. And then to install this, all you have to do is line up the PCIe slot with the top one on the motherboard and basically slide it in until you hear a click. So just like that, we have it installed, and then we're just going to take another screw and basically lock this in. Then we can plug in the PCIe wire that we already pre-routed. So we're just going to make sure this is plugged in properly, and then we're just going to line it up and put it in. Then we can reinstall this bracket that we just removed just to put everything back in place. And just like that, the $1,200 gaming PC is now complete. But yeah guys, that is the entire gaming PC, and the total for everything came out to $1,207, which I think is pretty good. Especially for 1440p gaming, which is what we are targeting, I really do think we're gonna get great performance. But of course, the best way to actually see that is through some benchmarks, which I will be showing you guys so you guys can see how this PC performs. But yeah guys, that is the entire $1,200 gaming PC build. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.